Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, the climate guy setting the record straight about climate. In this video, I discuss the fundamental deception behind climate science. I ride my bicycle almost every day up to the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, and I see some pretty amazing sights. NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research, has done some extremely good work on weather modeling and weather science. On the other hand, their climate science is a completely different story. This is a display in the NCAR Museum titled Carbon Dioxide and Temperature, Hand in Hand. The fundamental concept behind global warming theory is that as carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, temperature increases with it. And that's what this exhibit is purporting to show. It says, greenhouse gas concentrations and global temperatures have risen and fallen together over millions of years. We know this thanks to proxy data or clues left on Earth by the weather and climate of long ago. Such data can include the growth rings or chemical composition of ancient trees and coral, layers of tree pollen, fossilized leaves, and shells found in ocean or lake sediments, or the composition of dust or air bubbles trapped in ice sheets. One of the key findings from proxy data is that global temperature and atmospheric carbon dioxide are closely linked. They typically rise or fall together. Through Earth's history, changes in carbon dioxide have produced changes in global air temperature, just as we're seeing today. Sometimes a temperature change can come first. Well understood variations in how Earth orbits the Sun can alter regional temperature, which in turn affects carbon dioxide. No matter which one leads the way, when either temperature or carbon dioxide goes up, we can expect the other to follow soon. Now we're going to examine that claim and see if it's accurate. And here's their graph. It shows ice core data going back 800,000 years. The blue line is carbon dioxide concentration, and the red line is temperature. We can see in this graph going back 800,000 years from the present a number of ice age cycles. This was the most recent ice age that was preceded by a very warm period. Ice age, very warm period. And we can see that there's a correlation between temperature and carbon dioxide. When the temperature dropped, carbon dioxide dropped. When the temperature rose, carbon dioxide rose. When the temperature dropped, carbon dioxide dropped. This has been a consistent pattern over the last 800,000 years. But let's look a little bit closer at this graph now. Over the last 100 years, a big problem appears in the graph. There's been a large carbon dioxide spike, but no corresponding temperature spike. So if carbon dioxide drives the temperature as NCAR claims, how come this big CO2 spike didn't have a corresponding temperature spike? If global warming theory was correct, the Vostok ice core data should have shown a big spike in temperature over the last 100 years, but it didn't. Based on these past swings in temperature, a spike in carbon dioxide this size should have produced a 20 to 30 degree increase in temperature. But in 2004, NASA's top climate scientist, Gavin Schmidt, reported that during recent decades, surface temperatures in Antarctica decreased significantly. So what's the problem here? How come for the last 800,000 years carbon dioxide and temperature tracked each other really closely until the last 100 years? Let's look at what went wrong. Imagine you have a horse pulling a cart. Everywhere the horse goes, the cart's going to be right behind it. So one of these two is driving the other. Either temperature is driving the carbon dioxide, or the carbon dioxide is driving the temperature. That's the story which NCAR wants you to believe. But we can see very clearly from the graph that carbon dioxide is not driving the temperature. When carbon dioxide spiked over the last century due to the burning of fossil fuels, there was no corresponding temperature spike. What this tells us is that temperature drives the carbon dioxide through the last 800,000 years, not the other way around. This is a concept which geologists have understood for centuries. In fact, it's a very fundamental concept behind geology, is that when ocean temperatures increase, they outgas carbon dioxide. This is because the solubility of carbon dioxide decreases in warm water. That's why we find limestone reefs in warm water. The warm water can't hold very much dissolved carbon dioxide. It releases some of it into the atmosphere, and some of it precipitates out as limestone rock. And everyone who's ever opened up a warm beer or soft drink understands this concept too. If you open up a warm can of beer, huge amounts of carbon dioxide come out of it. A warm beer will quickly lose its fizz because the solubility of carbon dioxide is much lower in warm beer than it is in cold beer. It's the same concept with seawater. If we warm up the seawater, it releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That's exactly what this ice core data shows. Changes in temperature produce changes in carbon dioxide. It's not the other way around, as NCAR wants you to believe. Global warming theory is based on the idea that the cart is pushing the horse. They're saying that carbon dioxide increases produce temperature increases, but we can see that over the last 100 years, that simply isn't true. This is a huge problem for climate alarmists. Let's look at how they tried to hide it. The 1990 UN IPCC report showed that temperatures on Earth were much warmer around 900 years ago than they are now. This also wrecked global warming theory. Carbon dioxide levels are much higher now than they were in the year 1100 AD, but temperatures were much warmer back then. This was a huge problem for climate alarmists, so 10 years later they completely changed the data. Michael Mann's famous hockey stick in the 2001 IPCC report removed the medieval warm period. They made it very cold back then, and they put a huge spike over the last 100 years. This matched global warming theory. Only problem is, it didn't match reality. Michael Mann made the medieval warm period disappear, and he made the little ice age disappear. And then he added this huge hockey stick onto the end. Let's take a closer look at now how that was constructed. The actual tree ring data showed that temperatures declined here, but Michael Mann threw that out. That was called hiding the decline. Instead of using the proxy data which showed the decline, Michael Mann replaced it with thermometer data from NASA, which is the red line here. Let's take a close look at that now. In 1974, the director of NCAR was a brilliant solar scientist named Walter Orr Roberts. He understood that the climate was driven by the sun, and this was a graph which NCAR published in 1974. It showed that there was no warming or actually a little bit of cooling from 1870 to 1970. There was warming from 1880 to 1940, but almost all of that warming was lost during the rapid global cooling which occurred between 1940 and 1970s. But if we look at the current NASA temperature graph, which makes up the blade of Michael Mann's hockey stick, we no longer see that cooling after the 1940s. In fact, temperatures actually went up slightly from the 1940s through the 1970s. In this graph, I overlaid NASA's current temperature graph in red on the NCAR graph from 1974 in black. You can see that NASA has completely erased the post-1940 cooling, which was very prominent in the 1974 NCAR graph. This didn't happen all at once, though. NASA has been erasing this post-1940 global cooling for a long time. The black line in this graph shows NASA's 1981 global temperature graph. The red line shows their 2001 version, and the blue line shows their 2016 version. You can see what they've been doing. They've been steadily cooling the past, and they've been steadily warming the present. They created this hockey stick by constantly altering the data over and over and over again. Second of all, proxy data shows us that the Earth was warmer in the year 1100 than it is now. Third, the hockey stick is fake. They removed the medieval warm period, they removed the little ice age, they removed the proxy data which showed cooling after 1960, and they added in fake NASA temperature data to create the hockey stick blade. This is not how we do science. We don't alter the data to match the theory. We should make our theories match the data. But as always, the story gets much worse. Al Gore and Laurie David, the people who made the movie Inconvenient Truth, did an even dirtier trick. In Laurie David's children's textbook, she actually reversed the x-axis to make it look like carbon dioxide led temperature rather than the other way around. In her graph, time moves forward from right to left. It shows carbon dioxide in red changing ahead of temperature in blue. This is completely fraudulent. This is the exact opposite of what the ice core data actually shows. The claim that carbon dioxide drives temperature in the historical record has no basis in science. This is the biggest scam in science history. Visit Toto on the web at realclimatescience.com. He's been pulling back the curtain on junk science for a long time.